In this continuing series surrounding buffer foods, I'd like to touch upon and share with you upon the plant-based options out there. This entire section, just for a bit of a contextual reminder, has taken me a great deal of time. In that this has taken me many weeks, if not months, of re-editing, retaking, re-recording, and so on and so forth. There are still many things that I'm still trying to navigate through my own tolerances and or intolerances when it comes to these plant-based foods and or selections. We're not just talking about lentils, legumes, but also we're talking about textured vegetable proteins. Yes, very controversially at that I may have to actually change my stance at times. However, this does not mean that they do not leave their own question marks. So before we begin yet this another long feature presentation, which I do sincerely hope for your humble patience, is number one, straight to the point. We are dealing with plant-based foods in which people may actually struggle with the idea as to why I'm actually choosing these carbohydrate heavy plant-based foods acting as a buffer food proteins. However, we are talking about economics here. And number two is when it comes to the actual bottom line of anything to do with gut discomforts or digestibility factors. Yes, there are still going to be some discomfort. Symptoms, that is, ranging from either highly frequent bowel movements as well as also the opposite, any stomach pains and or episodes which may or may not happen to frequently, at least in my case, but for some people, especially if they introduce such large bolus amount of intakes without gradual acclimatization or periodization for their body to get used to, it might be an issue. So, disclaimer number two, as always, my gut settings and profiles are my own. I'm going to share with you all over how I feel across the 4 types of products that I have actually been using, nevertheless, as a plant-based buffer food. So that's that when it comes to the disclaimer. Next, I'm going to show you several examples over how much can you get out of your initial total investment cost in a form of a batch cooking session output. So how much do I actually utilize in any given meal? Well, of course, that depends whether or not I'm in a low carbohydrate weekdays following my usual 20 to 21 hours of fasting, that is, in which, of course, as you may know, the overall net carbohydrates needs to be a lot lower comparatively, in contrast to that, against the higher carbohydrate allowance days. And what we have here is the result of a mixed batch pressure cook, that is, 1 out of 4 glass containers that you can make as a batch. How much do I actually consume? A quick demonstration. Of course, this is actually slightly tough and slightly solidified because of the fact that it's actually combined with the gelatinous meats and proteins. I would actually be eating around about this much. So I'm just going to put that aside. And also in this case here, I'm going to also be including in a little bit of a soya wadi, in which again, we're going to be discussing that in a later section. However, is this all there is that I am actually eating? Of course not. I still would like to emphasize the need for non-negotiable proteins, and that is eggs. So I will incorporate at least 2 eggs on top of this. And also, of course, on a low carbohydrate days, so the remaining of the calories should ideally be comprising to that as the fats. Just to taste, that is. So this can be either extra cheese, extra butter, creams, and or mayonnaise. So obviously, being a higher carbohydrate allowance diet, this is where I can actually include higher carbohydrate sources. Primarily here is just my DIY flatbread. Say 100 grams worth of plain flour, salt, and water. That's it. Nothing too fancy, as you can see. It's just me utilizing what I can there is. So basically, in this case, this is actually a mix between chickpeas, as well as also, of course, combining that with the beef brisket bones. And that's that. Really. Nothing pretentious, nothing special. Then I just add the seasoning on top. But that's that. Very simple. So these four options are going to be chickpeas or garbanzo beans, followed by the blue boiler peas, and then, yes, the soya wadi or the textured vegetable proteins, followed by the pea protein isolates and or concentrate powders themselves. I've not actually been using this for quite some time, only recently. So that is that. Let's go through each of those in detail. Alright, so let's begin with chickpeas. And there are two quick reasons as to why I'm actually including chickpeas here. The very first thing is, number one, is type of plant-based proteins that people can usually relate to. The most prevalent there is amongst our supermarket shelves these days. And also, number two, and this is good for anyone to note, is such that due to their highly, much more laborious processes, by me showing you what those laborious processes are, e.g., try to make sure that you reserve as much time and patience trying to de-shell away all the husks altogether, that will at least shows you the awareness upon the fact that, okay, this has to be done throughout many other types of legumes out there. Some you can actually get away with less work, in which that is coming with the blue boiler peas, in which that comes as my next recommendation. However, this is just goes to show you how much work is involved nonetheless, so that you are aware. So when it comes to the chickpeas, of course, there is so much other variants and or subcategory of types out there, in which again, I won't be able to actually disclose through each of those in detail, because there's light version and there's also dark versions. And considering also each of those may have some implications when it comes to the anti-nutrient profiling themselves. More info on that in another separate video altogether. Because the total investment cost is how much does it cost for me to purchase this in their initial form, in their bulk form, that is. However, when it comes to the utilization cost, instead of me trying to determine and to give you an idea over how much exact per meal cost, instead I'm going to go and base by number of batch cooking sessions potential that you can get out of that total investment cost. First of all, you have to pre-soak them into, as you would know, any acidic mediums should be at least 1.5 to 2 days with boiling water, not with cold water, boiling water with apple cider vinegar. And once that's done, the pressure cooking begins. I would actually try to pressure cook no more than 500 grams worth of a starting amount, because dry weight amounts, because otherwise that is just so highly impractical. It's highly impractical, and I'm gonna show you why later on. So basically, within these three or four pressure cooking checkpoints, each constituting anywhere between 20 or 25 minutes, you would have to stop. That's right, you have to stop, drain away the water, and then what you're gonna do is you have to pretty much manually de-shell or manually scrub away all the cellulose somehow. And the only way for you to do that is to, unfortunately, this is where the laborious process begins, tip away all the cooking water, and then manually scrub them with cold water, obviously, run them through your hands, and just patiently going through the deshelling process. And you're going to repeat that 3 or 4 times. Then, all that takes is just season the finished batch into your glass containers, and there you go. You're done. So that's that. Chickpeas. I would say that chickpeas will be the bottom of this list. It doesn't mean that it is always going to be the worst. It is more or less I would say the less tolerable. Let's just call it that way. So basically, I would actually rate the chickpeas as the baseline, so to speak. That is, in terms of gut discomfort-wise, is that yes, I still experience either moments of constipation, but also sudden loose bowel movements as well. It is quite difficult to pretty much ascertain or to predict when or how this will happen. So take that for what it is. It is just subjective experience coming from me. However, having said that, I'm going to show you on the screen here a list of a ranking list of the common legumes out there, and according to their FODMAP's concentrations, whether or not this is actually going to be accurate or not is, of course, up to debate, because as we alluded to earlier, garbanzo and chickpeas alone, there are many, many different subtypes out there. My experience within the chickpea so far is only taken from the context of the most common household varieties that you can actually find amidst the grocery stores and or the shelves today. As a TLDR, once again, chickpeas, I would say it is the bottom baseline. Yes, I still experience some concern, but is it extremely dire though? I would say not really. So that is that. Chickpeas. Blue boiler peas. So these are actually can be quite economical. So for every $3 or $4 per up to 1 kilogram, I can easily and comfortably yield up to 3 or 4 potential batch cooking sessions, in which each batch cooking session and potentially yield up to 3 or 4 meals each, depending, of course, how much things that you can actually combine them with. They may actually markedly more reduce in terms of their net carbohydrates content. What I tend to find here is that blue boiler peas, they tend to have less of cellulose content that I see that's actually floating about once you actually pressure cook them, either after 1 or 2 checkpoints, or even just the very first checkpoints. That should easily allow you to then scoop away the indigestible cellulose. But other than that, you go through the same cooking process, pressure cooking process, and the advantage of that is that we can also combine it with pork leg, lamb legs, or other gelatinous cuts of meat that way, so you can cook them all at once. Compared to the garbanzo or the chickpeas, I experience less drastic events, at least less very bad events, let's just put it that way, in between periods of bad constipation versus that also bad, very loose stools, almost to the point of diarrhea-like symptoms. That this is just my subjective experience, and that so far, at least from my research, it is very difficult for me to be able to understand as to how and why that this is the case. Whether or not there is some sort of imbalances in between anti-nutrient profiles or anti-nutrient in there within the garbanzo beans that might be different to the blue boiler peas. Who knows? That may be better reserved in our later video upload altogether. The soya wadi, or the TVP in this case, textured vegetable proteins. This is where, let's just start off with the actual cost first of all. So this is, once again, very economical and markedly much higher in terms of their, obviously, in terms of their macronutrient offering towards the protein side of things. So this will be anywhere between $3.50, if I remember correctly, although no, up to $5 per 500 gram chunks per bag, so to speak. Here, let's actually start with the good points when it comes to TVP or soya wadi, just for once. Number one is, as we actually mentioned and alluded to earlier, is that how affordable it is. It is so affordable that anyone should be able to, at least within just a humble budget of, say, even just $5 or $6 to spend on any grocery store, you could pretty much walk away out of the grocery stores a very, very high amounts of food-based proteins right in front of you. And that number two is just how quick it is for anyone to prepare. And once again, it doesn't actually take any skills at all. Like it's one of those things whereby you hardly need to be a chef or a cook by any chance at all. All you need is just boiling water, and that I actually still recommend that you actually use one of those tofu press that you actually that you can actually purchase one from eBay. So basically what that tofu press does is that drains underneath all those holes underneath in which you can actually press the tofu to help release all the water. The reason why you would want to do this is because that you can reduce the rubbery or the earthy processing aftertaste that you actually get with it. That comes with the inherent within just how processed this product is really. The negative side effects that I'm actually referring to is the somewhat psychogenic nature. Remember, it is actually not easy when it comes to describing any psychogenic effects that you actually get from food. But yes, this is one of such food. This is what I describe as the fact that you feel numb in the head. You feel somewhat subdued in the head. No, it doesn't mean that you feel zoned out or anything of that crazy sort. No, nothing like that. However, it is replicatable. That is it is something that I certainly can replicate. These effects that this numbness, so to speak, has been lingering in the background. And now as to how or why or what actually caused or led this is where we have to go down into the rabbit hole over the TVP or soya wadi itself, which unfortunately this is not the space or nor the video for me to actually talk about that. But suffice to say, there are two things that actually came into my clear suspect, that came as a suspect to me, so to speak. And number one is to do with glutamate sensitivity, and number two, soya wadi and or TVP can be very, very high in oxalates. When it comes to the gut comfort, I would rate soya wadi to be of a better comfort profiling. However, as I alluded to earlier, they represent a different problem, and that is oxalates. Again, as a bit of a workaround measure is to always have some dietary calcium, from my preference, from cheese or dairy products, because once again, not only they actually provide the fats and other proteins coming from cheese, obviously, and also with the fact that you get some appreciable amount of micronutrients coming from it that you can't actually get elsewhere, e.g. the vitamin K2, the menaquinones, etc., etc. And you get the butyric acid as well coming from dairy fat sources in general. Is it a lot though? Of course not. But it is there in as an appreciable amount that you wouldn't be able to get things elsewhere. So that is that. If there is another thing that you can do is to actually take the reconstituted soya wadi and actually put them in the oven. What I tend to find is that this does help somewhat. Reduces that sponginess, and I consider that you also have to mix them with other condiments. It's pretty much it makes it more worthwhile, at least in my opinion. But hey, just give it a try. Just give it a try nonetheless. Let's actually start with the good points that I shall admit that they are actually quite good. At least at first glance. First of all, is protein. Finally, at last, we have the equivalent of a whey protein, but in plant-based. At least that's a tick. Because after all, it is the highest protein in the list here that we have so far. At least per grammage-wise and per dollar-wise even. So for every $1 you actually invest into pea protein, you get at least 70 to 80 grams worth of protein right there and then. Very difficult to find any faults in that. The next good point here. A lot of people, especially in the alternative health spheres, would actually glorify pea protein as not only it is quote unquote hypoallergenic, but also they tout it as the most safe form of protein due to their low methionine content, anti-aging benefits, cancer protectant, anti-inflammatory, and so on and so forth. It is to do with the concerns surrounding their implementation. Protein powder is protein powder. Surely it is as easy as just using water, a bit of flavoring, condiments, and that's that. And call it a day, right? Think again. The way I actually evaluate a buffer food's viability and their ranking is how practical is it? Like, do you need how many ingredients or any other prerequisite ingredients or prerequisite non-negotiables just for us to be able to use it? In this case here, pea protein unfortunately raised a lot of question marks. That you would have to add at least 3 or 4 things, not just condiments, not just sweeteners, but actual other whole food items just to make things worthwhile. Okay, what is the quickest and the shortest path to make a meal? I have to put a lot more sweeteners. I have to use a lot more other accompanying accessory things here and there, spices, cinnamon, more, how to say it's accessory accompanying ingredients just to mask away this highly rubbery, very dry, and very chalky inherent character to it. And it's extremely dry as well. Any feature meal that has lack of water and fluids content, e.g. if that is not coming from gelatinous cuts of meat that is very hearty and very full and rich, to me, compared to the dry recipe will almost always, again, without fail, always fail to reach satiety. At least in my case. I'm not sure, because once again, I'm not sure if this phenomenon may actually be relevant or applicable to many other people, but for me, throughout so many years of practicing intermittent fasting, whereby I actually pay attention to each and everything that I put into my mouth, at least within each and every feeding window over the last 7 years, time and time again, anything that's dry, anything that's cooked or finished dry, never satiates me, or at least satiates far less than if I were to, as you guessed it, rely on animal-based, gelatinous, heavy-based proteins. Even though that, yes, I still would actually recommend pea protein for as long as money is no object to you. Even I must have actually advocated the use of pea protein as a meatloaf. Should you would like to know the recipe, please by all means visit my blog for more details. However, suffice to say, sooner or later you'll be adding eggs. Sooner or later you'll be adding a lot more things than before you realize that, oh, okay, I did not realize that I actually spent so much things, so much ingredients that it all adds up. And that, I hope, is where I can actually give you a much clearer perspective and to be cautious and to really, really think carefully over how much things that's actually required out there just to make things worthwhile, especially if you start anything with a powder form. So that is that. Pea protein isolates and or concentrates in this regard. There are pros and cons to everything when it comes to nutrition. Yes, I still firmly believe that animal-based proteins certainly, without question, without a doubt, confer much more meaningful array of macronutrients as well as also micronutrient availability, absorption, and utilization, and of all things, relevance. But this does not mean that one should exclude as well the economical value that plant-based sources provide. I'm here, therefore, hopefully trying to neither to persuade nor dissuade any viewers towards one or the other camp. I'm just trying to put together or bridge together a conversation on how does these things work in an array of higher carbohydrate allowance protocols versus that also with lower carbohydrate protocols. Leave it forward, and I hope to see you all again in the next presentation. Until then, take care for now.